Jefferson Robbins with NCW Life. Even if this were not a presidential election year, voters in the Wenatchee Valley would still have some pretty important choices to make. Among the important local offices up for election is that of Douglas County Public Utility District Commissioner. That's the agency that, if you live in Douglas County or work there, they keep your lights on, they keep your fiber internet flowing. It's a nonpartisan office. 2 candidates are on the ballot. We have challenger Matthew Hepner and incumbent Commissioner Ron Skagen. Thank you both for being here.
Thanks for having us.
I want you folks, although you may be known around the Valley for things you've done in the past, to introduce yourself to our viewers and voters as if you'd never been to their door before. You're door knocking. Matthew, we'll start with you since you're number 1 on the ballot. You have 1 minute to tell me what you would say to a voter to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Jefferson. Hi, my name is Matthew Hepner. I'm running for Douglas County PUD Commissioner Position 1. I'm currently elected to East Wenatchee City Council. I've been on council seven years. I'm a firm believer in term limits, and I want to be able to continue to serve my community in the industry that I know the best. I started my study in the electrical industry at the age of 19 in the United States Marine Corps as an aviation electrician. After my tour and a year in Afghanistan, I came home and I started the apprenticeship here in 06 with Schmidt Electric for my 01 journeyman's license. And then in 2015, I became the executive director of the Certified Electrical Workers of Washington, where I represent 12,000 electrical workers statewide, and I've got to work on policies that are around apprenticeship opportunity, job creation, economic development, and energy policy.
Thank you, Matthew. And Ron, introduce yourself as if no one has ever heard of you before.
My name is Ron Skagen, and first, Matthew, thank you for your service. I have 2 military boys, and my dad was a World War II vet. I appreciate it very much. Thank you. I'm a 4th generation Douglas County resident. I lived here most of my life, other than about 10 years between college and a couple jobs. I started my career in the tree fruit industry. My family had a business. I then gravitated toward banking. In the last 10 years, I've had a consulting business, and I'm the sole person doing that. I still have a large client in my consulting business. I've been a PUD commissioner for 18 years. I've been motivated to serve the community. That's part of my DNA. My dad died at a very young age. When he was 39 and I was 15. And I benefited from service and help from others, and I felt I needed to do the same. So I've been on the Community Foundation Board for 10 years, YMCA Board for 10 years, ran a school levy, lots of youth programs.
And we've hit your minute.
Good, I'm done.
I appreciate the introduction, Ron.
Thank you.
I want to stick with you for your first question. It's a 2-minute answer, and you can fill up that time or not as you need to. You've been doing this since 2007. What do you think is the most important duty of a Douglas County PUD commissioner?
You know, a person needs to be aware that no commissioner has more power or authority than the other. So you need to work collaboratively with those on your team. You need to be engaged with and be a good listener, working with the other 2 commissioners and the manager. You need to study the issues, be to the best you can. Time can be a limitation. I think for me, the biggest thing right now is to recognize what a PUD is, and it's Public Utility District. And I think that's lost by some in our community. It's owned by the public. The PUD was formed through the benefit of the Grange and initiative number 1, and it was because the rural people in the state were not getting electrical service. And I'm motivated to keep that value forefront in our minds. If anybody's going to get a good deal, it needs to be the low end, the lower half of our society, not the top end. We want to serve everybody, but we need to look after the underserved. Douglas PUD has always done that. Point out broadband service. We were one of the first to do wholesale broadband 20 years ago. We're 85% served. It's interesting that when we started this, we rolled it out to the rural part of the county, not East Wenatchee, because there was some level of broadband in East Wenatchee at that time, if you can call it that. We're 85% covered. That, I think we're the leader in the PUD world. People don't even talk about it. But we went to Bridgeport, Waterville, Mansfield first because they needed it. And that's, on the electrical side, we have learned that we have some risk associated with Wells Dam especially, and the changing in the flow of the river and weather. And we've taken precautions to make sure the generation from Wells Dam is here to benefit the citizens of Douglas County first. And that's a real important thing for us to pay attention to. So it's our DNA, who we are.
Thank you for that.
Okay.
And the same question to you, Matthew. From your perspective, what's the most important duty of a Douglas PUD commissioner?
So I would agree with everything that Ron just said. Making good decisions, making sound decisions, whether it's a decision to be risk averse, which definitely does have its place and time in the decision-making process, but also when to take action. And I think there's a lot of actions that are coming up. There are a lot of changes to the economy nationwide that has profound impacts on the grid. And Douglas County, we should be prepared for the benefits of the constituents of Douglas County to be prepared for that change.
I'll stick with you, Matthew, for the next question. One of the things that Douglas County PUD has done is branched out a little bit from power generation. All PUDs have done this over time, into hydrogen production. Up to 80 megawatts would be produced at the new pilot facility out toward the Baker Flats area. Right now, I think the cost is at roughly $30 million. This was something the PUD pursued. You were not commissioner at the time. Is this a strategy that you agree with, pursuing hydrogen production?
I definitely like the gumption that they had. I like that the PUD was aggressive in this space. Regarding the fuel station, I believe they may have put the cart before the horse. I'm a big proponent of hydrogen, but there are some concerns. Hydrogen takes a huge amount of electricity to generate. We might be the only standalone hydroelectric generating facility with hydrogen capacity around right now. There was a Centralia project that failed, that went under because they needed 300 megawatts and they couldn't find it. So if we're looking to be in a hydrogen ecosystem, are we currently on an island? And then there's a large project in the Tri-Cities, Atlas Agro, which is also looking for power. I hope they get it. Those would be great jobs to have here. And Douglas County PUD built that project on the high road, putting local electricians to work, tradespeople from all over, and that was greatly appreciated for those jobs. But I do want to see how the market responds to hydrogen, because I think we're going to be asked the question of what is more valuable, hydrogen or electricity, and the electricity that it takes to make. Got a great tour of the hydrogen facility and was interested to find that they're actually using direct current or DC power when we're generating an AC. So that means we're shipping AC power over, rectifying it, breaking it down to DC. And whenever you have a transfer of power like that, you have probably a 20%-ish energy loss. So if there was a way to generate in DC and go directly there, I think we could, increase the impact of the hydrogen that we're using and the electricity that we're able to sell.
And just to clarify something on your answer, I think you said you were questioning the creation of a filling center or of a fueling center, and that there's one that's being put in at the Douglas PUD headquarters,
yes,
separate from the production facility. So I think that's what you're mentioning.
Correct. And the gas fueling station, there's not very many vehicles in the entire state that can use that.
Sure.
But we definitely have it as a landmark, and it's marquee. And we'll see how it plays out.
Ron, the same question to you. The hydrogen pilot project is underway, not online yet, but are you happy with the decision that you made and confident that it's going to bring something back to the PUD?
I am, and so it's a common misunderstanding that the economics is based on filling fuel cell cars. That's not the economics. We're spending over $400 million reworking our turbines at Wells Dam. We're turning them on and off every 4 seconds because we're a balancing authority. Those big machines do not like that. So our motivation with hydrogen is primarily to extend the life of the turbines at the dam, and that's very important for the grid. I would say that, so far we have 5 megawatts. We've approved a second 5 megawatts. Our first year cash budget for next year is positive, 1.5 million. And that is because the value of the hydrogen, which is mostly not sold here, it's mostly sold in California, is so high. So it's a good thing to do. It is a pilot, it will be good financially. It'll extend the life of the dam. And we need to be willing to be innovators. And I just say, people don't know this, but 10, 15 years ago, I'd like to add, back up. The 25, 30 million we spent, half of that's been paid for by the state grants. We didn't count on that, but that's been good. And if we get the production tax credit from the feds, it'll pay 100% of our operating costs. So it's a good economic thing. About 15 years ago, we spent about $10 million in exploring wind generation in the Withrow area. And we should be willing to do venture outlook and experiment. We have a wind project in Tri-Cities. We should be willing to do that. And this is a reasonable approach to help the economy get reduced carbon. We're not generating electricity, but we are taking it at the time that it's more abundant. If someone plugs in, I got to hurry up. If someone wants to plug in an electric car, if we have 85% electric vehicles, we're in trouble. If some of those use fuel cell, we're in better shape because we're harvesting electricity when it's lower cost and at our convenience. I could talk more about this, and you don't have time. It's fascinating.
I'll stick with you for the next question, Ron, if I could. Recently, the PUD commissioners voted on a new rate schedule that will increase the cost of power for ratepayers in Douglas County. The average residential customer can expect to see about a $3 increase in monthly power bill starting in 2026, up to about $10 a month by 2030. I know there were market demands on why the commission made that decision, but can the PUD, and should the PUD explore ways to reduce that burden on ratepayers? Can ratepayers expect a cut in their utility bills?
I think one of our important tasks is to be truthful about our finances. And everybody would like to cut rates. Everybody would like to have lower rates. Our average electric bill in Douglas County is $60. My son lives in Kirkland. It's $400, and he has natural gas for heat and water. So our rates are very low, and that is not the issue. The issue is that when we run out of our surplus power, our rates will go up by 2 to 3-fold, and that is coming. And so we have to prepare for that eventuality. Hopefully it's 30 years from now, 40 years from now. But what's going to happen is we have reduced sales. About half of our revenue comes from surplus power sales. And it's not half our electricity because we're selling out of market, out of county, 3 times what we're selling it here. As that declines and we're growing in the lowest rate category in residents, we have a problem. And we have to prepare for it. It's not fair to wait for some future commission to say, oh, by the way, now you got to raise rates 25% every year because we have not planned. And the other thing with that is we have to build our reserves. We have some very significant risks with that dam that could be very costly, up to $1 billion. We have to start building capital reserves for that. So I think it's not being truthful to tell customers we can do less. We are already the lowest rates in the state. And quite frankly, they should be hearing that we're probably going to be raising rates about 5% per year for about the next 20 years. That should be the baseline expectation. We'll still be one of the lowest. Schlein PUD has the ability to be the lowest because 75% of their power is surplus. So they have 3 dams, 2 big ones, 1 small. But we have to take care of our own financial order. These are multi-generation assets. We have to take care of it for the future.
And Matthew, your thoughts? Can the PUD be exploring ways to reduce that burden on ratepayers? And how do we do that if, as Ron says, the formulas are weighted in favor of rates going up over time?
I think that's where Ron and I, probably align on the majority of issues. But I think the strategy to enable that, to lock in rates for residents, is probably where we differ. I would, want to take more of a coalition approach to locking in rates. Bringing in allies, working with the state legislature, the federal government, to find avenues and pathways to lock in rates, not reduce rates. I mean, honestly, we're never going to go back. But if we can, take a snapshot in time and keep that for as long as possible, and keeping those rate increases at the smallest we can for as long as we can, is going to be a benefit to all people in Douglas County. I think that's something Ron and I would probably agree with. Now, how we go on about doing that, I think looking into generation so we can have that surplus power and how we would procure new generation, as well as we have to also address the capacity of the grid and transmission and distribution systems. So we can't just throw energy onto the grid and start selling it if the grid can't hold the energy. So the transmission system is basically the bucket that we stick our electricity in. So we need to make sure that our bucket is in good repair and also is large enough to hold new generation coming onto the grid.
Well, my next question actually went to power generation, and I'll stay with you for this one, Matthew. So Douglas PUD through Wells Dam historically can produce up to 840 megawatts. That's at peak through Wells Dam. Since we're talking about a need for more power and increasing costs, does Douglas PUD need to move into other alternative generation sources? Ron, you mentioned wind power. Grant County is looking at small volume nuclear power sometime in the future. Are those areas, Matthew, that you think the Douglas PUD should be exploring?
Absolutely. And when it comes to generation opportunities, I'm quite agnostic. Just let's get the electrons on the grid. Whether it's fusion, like I think Chelan is also looking at. There's fission and fusion are both options. There's solar, there's wind. There is a proposed solar project on Badger Mountain. There's also a pump storage proposed project on Badger Mountain as well. So any of those options can work. The question is which one's going to pan out economically for Douglas County. And by that I mean we get the most electrons with a bait 24 hours a day. Solar is great until nighttime comes, which happens every day. So what kind of resources can we have that are going to be 24 hours a day? And that's when you start narrowing it down to fission and fusion. Unless you're pairing those renewables with energy storage device, whether that's batteries or pump storage.
And Ron, I come back to you for the same question. Should PUDs be pushing, Douglas County PUDs specifically, be pushing into these kind of alternative generating sources?
Yes, but very carefully. So I'm old enough to remember WHOOPS. Do you remember WHOOPS?
I know the acronym.
Yeah, well, 5 or 6 nuclear plants built on this massive growth anticipated, largest bankruptcy in municipal bankruptcy in the history of the country in 1983. So we have to not get the cart in front of the horse. We have to be very careful. Now those are large plants and they were mismanaged, but public entities do that a lot. So I say yes, we look at everything. We should be tipping in and we should be offloading risk to the large users first. And by the way, the data centers are interested in that. Microsoft is into nuclear, and our data centers are agreeable to that. So we don't have to take on that risk. We can manage it, we can distribute it. I agree we need to beef up our distribution so we can handle that, but we should not be buying very expensive, long life generating assets for these large national and multinational companies. And they are willing to do it, so we just need to help them. Conceptually, I think solar right now may be the most interesting for us because we have the dam, it's a run-of-river dam, but we can back it up a little bit. So if we had some solar that we could use in conjunction with the dam, a share of that would feel like it's base load. So that's something we're interested in, but there's a lot of public opposition to that. So that's going to require a robust public process. It'd be best if it was in Badger Mountain area or in our county because we have the transmission assets and we'd make revenue from that. So that's a lower cost outlay, and it's about a 20-year asset, something we could justify. We're interested and we need to be participating. I'm on Energy Northwest group and they're looking at, they have modular, we're not buying any of the resources, but we should be looking at all of those things. But there is something we should also be considering for long term, and I'm gonna run out of time. Do you want me to say it?
I'll come back to it.
Okay.
Let me bring up something or come back to something you both bring up, which is the Badger Mountain Solar Project. I do want to point out that's been kind of put on pause or on hiatus surrounding concerns around whether indigenous groups were properly involved and informed. There's also the question of sage grouse habitat on Badger Mountain, so solar power may be a long way away at that particular site. I do want to ask Ron about something else you brought up, which is data centers. And Douglas County PUD has had as policy a moratorium on directly supplying power to data centers. Data centers now are moving into the AI area. There's a huge demand for electricity in that vicinity. Is the Douglas County PUD leaving money on the table by not servicing any longer those very large volume customers?
We have used up all of our transmission capacity for the large data centers, so they have not slowed down. They're kind of bidding against the last chunk that's available. So not giving them output from Wells has not slowed them down. I want to back up and point out, when we built Wells Dam, the risk was on utilities in the Seattle area. So we didn't have to we could never have done it otherwise. And they got the power, most of it, for a long time. Eventually, now we have the risk, but we get the power. We do not have to put the county at risk to do this stuff. Microsoft's a $4 trillion company. They're working with a large energy company to restart that 9 Mile Island nuclear plant. They have the money. They are willing to do it. And so we can help them, but we do not need to put the county at risk.
And Matthew, yourself, AI again is a going concern right now. Could the PUD be making more return by offering to service those large volume data centers?
That's a very complicated question to answer in 2 minutes. But first I want to back up a little bit. When we're talking about the grid and energy demands on the grid, there's been a lot of finger pointing at data centers and AI, and it's not just that. I mean, it's EVs, it's hydrogen, it's electrification policy, it's data centers, it's AI, it's Snapchat, it's the fact that the modern economy is based off electricity. So like I said before, we've literally outgrown our grid. So Washington State currently uses, or produces roughly 25 gigawatts. By 2035, we're going to need literally double that, statewide. So I think the fact that all of us, all the PUDs, all the utilities, are going to need to be getting together, finding out ways to increase the capacity on the grid to put that new generation on there. Now, when it comes to those industrial load customers, if it's going to be profitable for Douglas County, and not just the PUDs, but is it profitable? Does it make good economic sense for the county commissioners, just the county of Douglas, or the city, or the Parks District, or those other districts, and the community and that tax base? We need to look at that, because there's a huge amount of income that comes from those data centers into the valley.
And I know there was more that you both probably wanted to talk about. I'm going to disappoint you and move directly to our closing. I'm going to start with you, Matthew, in a 1-minute answer, if you could. Why should people vote for you for Douglas County Commissioner? So Douglas County PUD Commissioner.
Thank you. So again, my name is Matthew Hepner. I'm running for PUD Commissioner. I've spent a lifetime in the electrical industry. The 3 main things that I want to do if elected is first, start by locking in rates for customers however we can, building coalitions to do that. Second, investing in transmission capacity and distribution capacity. Third, our generation resources. And then looking at conservation efforts. So these would be efforts like windows and insulation in your homes. Chelan PUD has done a really good job of this. This is also, if you have like a swamp cooler air conditioning system, this would be moving into mini splitless duct systems that are more efficient. This is a way actual consumers, residents can actually decrease the amount of electricity and decrease their bill. So there's a lot of state grants and there's money on the table to go and do this. And those are the kind of wins we should be bringing home to the people of Douglas County.
Matthew, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Ron, 1 minute. Why should people vote for you for PUD Commissioner?
Well, first I want to clarify, the data centers that you're referring to, they're here. And they're getting all that they want. So that's not an issue. I think the PUD world, energy world, is very tense right now. We have a lot of adversaries, not enemies. We have a lot of competition for what we have. And I think it's extremely important that we protect our resources so that the customers, the residents in Douglas County, keep the low rates. 30% of the citizens in this county do not own the home they live in. The low rates are really important. And I agree with Matthew on the conservation. We spend $500,000 on that a year, and we've hired a consultant to help us find other things that we can do in conservation. And that is a good, with the rates being so high right now, that makes more sense. Douglas PUD is 200 employees. Chelan County is 800 employees. There's a lot of differences between the utilities, and we should keep that in mind as we make comparisons.
Well, Ron Skagen, Douglas County PUD Commissioner, Matthew Hepner, the challenger for that seat. I appreciate you both coming in to sit down with us today.
Thank you.
Jefferson.
You're watching the NCW Life channel.